Welcome to episode 40 of the Filmumentaries podcast. This is Jamie Benning here. That seems like a bit of a milestone. And quite satisfyingly, as I'm publishing this 40th episode, I'm now supported by 80 patrons on Patreon. If you're a new listener, thanks for joining me. I hope you'll enjoy this as well as the 39 episodes that came before it. If you're a regular, you know the deal. It's about 40 to 100 minutes of relaxed chat with people who either worked in the movies or are connected in some way to the movies. I hope you enjoyed my last exclusive podcast, exclusive in as much as it was a developing news story, in which I spoke to Sobi, the guy who fronted $3 million for that Dune book. I was also joined by the director of the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune from 2013, that's Frank Pavich, as well as my friend, producer, presenter, collector Dan Lanigan. Sobi talked at length, and Frank, Dan and I were left a bit bemused as to what we just heard. And I've since heard that the Dune DAO project is looking a bit rocky at the moment. I hope to have an update soon, some more news on that as I get it. By the way, if you do want to help support the podcast, it could cost as little as $12 for the entire year. And having now reached 80 patrons, I'm earning enough to cover my hosting fees and research costs. But I'd love to be able to make this work as part of my career and put more energy and time into producing additional content, my videos, for instance, and also focusing more on this podcast, focusing more time. And with your support, I hope to be able to do that. So please do think about buying yourself or someone you love, maybe the gift of Patreon for the holidays. That's patreon.com/Jamie Benning. Oh, and by the way, tips are now open on Twitter. I didn't know what that was until I was offered it by Twitter, but you can click on a little button there and you can donate a one-off donation. You can also donate at buymeacoffee.com/filmumentaries. I changed it to buy me a book on there because I have to buy books in my research. And any help you can give would be great. But if you can't afford to donate, please just help this independent podcast. Yes, it's just me, by rating and reviewing on Apple Podcasts, and also by sharing on Twitter and Facebook and wherever else you can, word of mouth even. Okay, so I'm a lover of movie books. I own a lot of them. I'm looking up at them now. Yep, there's a lot of them. I've owned more than I have now. Some I've sold on over the years when they've become valuable and I've needed money in quiet times in my freelance career. Some of my favourites include Alan Arnold's Once Upon a Galaxy, The Making of The Empire Strikes Back, Paul Salmon's Future Noir, The Making of Blade Runner, Stephen Back's Final Cut. God, there's so many to name. Obviously, J.W. Rinsler's fantastic books as well. But what I didn't know, and I'm embarrassed to say this, I had no idea about Jay Glennie and his books on The Deer Hunter, Raging Bull, and now Trainspotting until pretty recently, actually. It was actually a Twitter follower that suggested that we hook up and have this interview that you're about to hear. So thank you to that kind person. I'm sorry, I couldn't find you in the reams and reams of tweets since then, but I do appreciate it because I had a very nice time talking to Jay. Immediately, I could see that Jay had a great eye for the design of the books, but also there was a clear and engaging narrative that runs throughout as well. These are not just coffee table books. They look gorgeous, but, once you get in between those covers, you really do pore over the images and the text. So in late November 2021, Jay and I spoke over Zoom, despite the fact that we live in counties only separated by the famous River Thames. So here's my chat with author Jay Glennie, and I'll be back at the end for a bit more jabbering on. What is your background? How did you first become aware of this passion for movies?
I'm not in the movie industry, so it hasn't come from there. But yeah, I've always been a fan, like yourself and like many of us. But bizarrely, and this isn't taking away anything from films, which I absolutely adore watching, I really, really, really loved reading about films ever since I can remember. And that isn't just films, actually. I love reading about the mechanics of anything. If there's a documentary or there's an article of the mechanics of how it worked and why it happened and the process. I love hearing about the process, how artists created something, always have. And that was the birth of Coattails, really. I was working on a project. I dreamt up TV formats, and I came up with this idea of looking at Oscar winners. I won't go into details into it, but I started cataloguing Oscar winners and then writing away to them to see if they would be interviewed for me. This is well before the day of podcasts. I didn't know why I was going to interview them. I had no idea of a book. It was more sort of, let's see if it would work for a TV format, really, I suppose. But the three guys behind the Deer Hunter were British. And their stories, well, say three of the four guys, the other guy was Michael Cimino, the director. But the three main producers were British, and their stories were so full of rancor and bitterness and regret and triumph and joy that my antennae went up and thought, well, there's a bigger story here just than their Oscar win about the behind the scenes making of the film. So I started writing away to various people in the Deer Hunter family, and the story was growing. I then met some guys that had images for the film The Man That Fell to Earth, the Bowie film. And the guys produced that, but the same guys are behind the Deer Hunter. So I said, look, guys, you've got the images. Why don't I invite the cast and crew of The Man That Fell to Earth to tell me their stories? And that sort of gave birth to me writing books. I then, when I went to visit Nick Rogue for that book, I asked him what it was like to release a film and not get that instant gratification. Perhaps just one film that he Don't Look Now, maybe all the others have sort of like a fine wine of that has come later. And I didn't think he'd heard my question, Jamie, and he had, and he said very, very quietly, he said to me, it's lonely, it's incredibly lonely. And this was Nick Rogue. And wow, and I remember leaving his house thinking, I'm going to get a group of filmmakers together to tell him how much he's loved. So I just contacted a few people, Terry Gilliam, people like that. And one of the guys was Sandy Lieberson, who's a film producer, and he had produced Performance. So when I gave him a copy of The Man That Fell to Earth as a thank you, he said, look, do you want to get together and partner up and replicate a large format book on Performance? So I went down and I said, look, I'd love to do it, but I need images. And he said, look, come down and have a look at the boxes. And there was boxes and boxes of images. And I said, well, that's great, but I really do want Mick and James to come on board. Like I've got any right to assume that. And asked Nick again. And all three of them said yes. So I paused the Deer Hunter work, dived back into Performance, started work on Performance. So Performance came out first. And then I went back to the Deer Hunter and yeah, and that's where all rather long answer to your question. It was literally just my love of film that suddenly I saw myself writing books.
It's amazing, isn't it? When it must be so gratifying. I've had that feeling myself, you know, with the interviews that I've done, when you write off to somebody just on the off chance and you get this reply, yeah, sure. And you think, hang on a minute, I haven't fully prepared myself for this. Like when I contacted Walter Murch and said, you know, I'd love to talk to you about your, you know, your career and your upcoming book and everything else. Yeah, sure. He said we could do 2 episodes if you like. You know, we can do one talking about that and one specifically about the film I directed. And I'm like, he's like, why don't you come up to London next week? I'm doing a lecture. You know, it's like, wow. And it's amazing that these guys want to talk. But I think, you know, there's a certain age of gentlemen from the film industry that have reached a point in their life now where they are willing to look back and are willing to talk over these things, because their careers may either be finishing or over and they've fully retired, and they want to talk about these things disconnected from that need to sort of stay within the industry and keep up with the Joneses. I mean, what must it feel like to talk to Robert De Niro and write to him and get a response?
Yeah, it's a similar kind of process, really, as your encounter with Walter, really. It was just the case of I'd got the Deer Hunter to such a stage that the story, and he hasn't given much away over the years, so there wasn't much I could use about the Deer Hunter from Bob. So I knew I needed Robert De Niro, Meryl Streep, and Chris Walken. And I mean, I've got a little bit, you know, you can see my shoulders flexing there. I've got a little bit. I thought, well, I'm going to have to ask the top, you know, maybe, you know, the star of the film, Robert De Niro. And I sent an email away to his reps, and they came back and said, yeah, I think Bob would be up for this. Oh, okay.
Amazing.
And he was, and you're told to call him Bob because his dad is Robert De Niro, and that's his dad's name. And we got on really well on the phone. Much the same as you said at the top of this, you're not up for any salacious gossip as such. I was really
Mm,
detailed and focused on that. I wanted to talk about the deer hunter, and yeah, he was really forthcoming. And before I knew it, then when I wrote to Meryl and Chris, they then verified that Bob was on board, and they came on board, and suddenly the deer hunter is now a go project. It was to get the three of the biggest icons in movie on board. You suddenly had and in that meantime, a sort of semi friendship, somewhat presumptuous of me to say, it had grown with Bob and I. And when I finished the book, he was over in town. We'd already
mm.
met a couple of times before, but when he finished the book, when I finished the book, sorry, he was in town. So I went to present him with the deer hunter, took a few down with me. And yeah, he was over the moon with it. He really was. And he asked what was next, which for a good Essex lad thinking on his feet, you never ask, yeah, it's give me an opportunity like that. And I immediately said Raging Bull. So we set the ball rolling on Raging Bull. And that was January, February, March. And then COVID hit.
Mm.
So I sent Bob an email and said, look, I'm going to start now, knowing that things, were going to be quieter. And I started writing away to cast and crew, Raging Bull. Bob and I were talking, and literally right to the almost to the point of press really on printing. He rung up, he emailed me and said, look, give me a call ASAP. And so I did, or he called me, and yeah, he got Joe Pesci for me, Jamie,
Wow.
which was just I had found an archival interview with Joe, so I'd managed to massage that into the text. But they're sort of, as you know, they're large books, and it was about 80,000 words, and I could just see there was a dearth where Joe should have been.
Mm.
Bob and I had read over the book over a couple of nearly 3 hours on the Zoom call, just going over everything. Not because Bob wanted to censor at all, because he just wanted to make sure everything everybody else said that he'd given his thoughts on, and just going over it. He's so meticulous. I can only wonder what it must be like to have a read through of a script with him, because he literally every fine little nuance. Okay, is that what he said? Is that how she remembered that? Oh, okay, and then we'd start riffing from there. And I think he picked up that there was a gap with Joe, and Joe just does not give interviews. I mean, just doesn't give interviews. And then, sure enough, I got the interview, and the first couple of questions were battered back with a firm bat of a no or a yes, which was not going to translate even for a podcast, let alone a book. And after the third question, we were away, and we got on really well. And his contribution to Raging Bull, not just the cinematic adventure, but the book has been huge for me.
Yeah, and it's great, that quote he gives at the start of the book when he says that he owes his life to the film and to Marty in many ways. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that
fantastic.
wasn't a question about the film. He didn't say that in about Raging Bull. With one of my questions, he actually said it at the top of our chat when I said thank you. Oh no, maybe it was at the end actually. I said thanks so much for today, Joe. And I mean, what do you call Joe Pesci, Mr. Pesci, sir? I mean, but yeah. So I said thank you, and he said no, not at all. He said, "Oh," and that's when he came out with that quote.
Amazing.
If he was literally a manager of a pizzeria restaurant, he'd given up, he'd gone to Hollywood, been battered around. He's not one to doff his cap and be too subservient. So he wasn't able to open up any doors into the film industry. He'd made one very, very small film, The Death Collector, which Bob and Marty had seen, and that's what gave them the idea that he could play Jake LaMotta's brother. But aside from that, he'd done nothing, and he was working in this pizzeria restaurant with a guitar. So every so often he'd pull out the guitar and do a few songs for the punters. It's just, and that is the genius of Bob and Marty, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Spotted that.
I love, as much as we talk about the difficulties of making movies and all the rancor and everything else, there are these amazing moments of happenstance as well among all of these movies. And with Raging Bull, I guess, Marty and Bob meeting at that party, having sort of known each other on the periphery of their friendships, and meeting years and years later, and finally deciding that they should work together. I mean, the stars clearly aligned on that day. Can you imagine a world without that now?
I know, and that was really key for me. Let's move my little camera. It's a bit of a mess, my office, but you can see, look, how many movie books are in here.
Yeah.
My wife would be horrified if I showed you just how messy it all is, but it's thousands.
Yeah.
movie books. So, and I don't mean this to bigging myself up too much, but I've read everything. And in the old adage, when you're writing a book, is to turn every page, and whether that be the internet or book. And I'd read everything, and I'd read about that party, and it was just literally 2 or 3 lines. No, 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 no. There's got to be more to that party and that. And I knew the host was the great Jay Cox in the East. When I say great, he's such a great guy. He was the Times critic or Time critic in America, and he befriended Marty, Brian De Palma, Paul Schrader. He was really the conduit for that little group of filmmakers in New York. And it was his party, and his wife Verna was an actress, and she worked with Bob on stage. So I really wanted to see what that party was like. So I got in touch with Jay, and he came on board, and he was the host of that party. So he gave me some great insights of what the music was playing and what was cooked. And Brian De Palma was also there. So I rang up Brian, and we had a Zoom. And I just wanted, because that, as you just said, that is, I'm sure there's bigger things have happened in the last century, but that's one of the greatest things to happen in the film's world ever.
Yeah.
Them two reconnecting. And there's no way I could do justice to a story or their story without investigating that. So to have Jay Cox, Brian De Palma, Bob, and Marty all talk about that party, I mean, I've got a little bit shivery, and I don't mind being a fanboy. It was just remarkable, because when it's like building a puzzle. You've got when you're writing a book of this ilk, you've got the frame of the story, and you kind of know that frame because you've done your research, you've done your work, you've put in your work. But that inner is where the excitement is, because you don't know where the guys, all the separate little pieces are going to take you, and you're willing to go on that journey. And so it's a case of, that you at the party, what can you remember? No, yeah, it's what you played that song, they didn't. Yeah, they did. And then you're away a little bit, and you just need to cajole them down some avenues which they've forgotten. I mean, it's 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And to their eyes at the time, it was just another New Year's Eve party. It wasn't a big thing.
Yeah, it's you've done an amazing job at pulling out those little details, and as you say, that's a really pivotal moment that up until now has just been sort of this small little side, little line at the bottom of an article or something. But how do you balance that when you're asking the questions to these big stars? I mean, obviously you said with Bob there was quite a lot of to and fro. I'm calling him Bob now. With De Niro, there was a lot of to and fro, but I'm aware sometimes when I interview people, I've only got like this hour or maybe 2 or 3 hours. How do you try and find the balance between getting those anecdotes, which you need to include in the book, but also trying to dig a little bit deeper and allow those moments to come where people haven't necessarily talked about these things for a while? Is it from talking to sort of crew members that might have a little story that nudge the memory?
Yeah, it is, Jeremy. Yeah, it is. It's also rather foolhardy as well, because you can't put the parameters too much in concrete when you're writing a book, but rather foolhardy. I don't know if other writers do this, but this serves me well. I write a book almost before I've done an interview, and I'm fluid enough to allow that book parameters to be broken. I can go anywhere. This is my little company. I can go anywhere with it. No one's telling me how many pages, when the book's got to come out. These are my babies. And so I can go anywhere with them. But because I've written the sort of parameters of the book, I know that some of the stories I want to touch on, but likewise, as I've touched on before, be willing enough to know that these guys are going to take me on another journey. But what you just said there is, and everybody that I've given a book to who's part of these books, cast and crew, has always said, oh man, it's the little stories, and they're the ones that are key. And it's a horrible, horrible term, because there's no way would I ever think of them this. But they're almost like butlers, a lot of these crew are. They've seen and heard everything, but they've never had an opportunity to tell their story. So when you unearth, I know I've sent you the copies of the book, the PDFs, but when you get the young girl, Gloria Norris, that transcribed their screenplay for her, she worked with Brian, and I tracked her down, and she spent those 3 weeks in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
And just working literally in the lodge next door to Bob and Marty. And I really, really wanted her to come on board. She got on great. She's telling me all these wonderful stories. And then she said she took these images of them on the beach. Really? Did you? How are you talking? Are you talking on a landline, aren't you? So you wouldn't have your iPhone close by. You could take a couple of pictures. And when she sent them through, it was like, wow, I've got to include them. They'd never been seen before. With the Deer Hunter, there was a young special effects guy. And when I say young, he was early 20s. Forgive me, it's been 4 years since I wrote that book, 3 years. I can't remember called his name, but he took a load of Polaroids. And those Polaroids that he took were just captured a moment. I knew I had to have them. And that's the beauty of when you unearth people with the present book, Trainspotting. I really, really wanted Michael Grade to come on board. And I can work just as hard picking up a Michael Grade than I can a Ewan McGregor. That's taking nothing away from Ewan McGregor. But because I knew that Michael would add another layer to it. And I also knew that Michael hated Trainspotting. He hated Shallow Grave. He was the head of film for, he wasn't the head of film for, so he was the head of Channel 4 at the time. But and he gave me great insight because what did he say? He said to me, he didn't like either film, but I wasn't making films for myself. I employed David Orkin to run Film 4. And when you employ people, you must believe in why you've employed them. And they know better than you. Because if I had all the answers, I wouldn't employ anybody.
Yeah.
And that, that was the good grace of somebody like Michael Grade. And he gave me the interview, and B, he told me that. And so that's in the book. Because he didn't like Shallow Grave at all. But with the success of Shallow Grave, it gave birth to Trainspotting. They had carte blanche to do what they like, and they took up a book which was deemed almost unfilmable. Irvin's book, wonderful book, but it's little vignettes of non-linear story, and they made this story out of it. But if it hadn't been for Michael Grade giving David Orkin they're the stories that you really need if you're going to be foolhardy enough to sit down and write a book. It's not really first-hand oral accounts, because I like to think there's a narrative running through it. But with the first-hand oral accounts within this narrative, you must really, really, really set yourself the task of trying to get as many people as you can to come on board. And with that, you have to win trust. It helps, if you've worked with a few people before that can say, no, he's a good guy, he's not going to break your trust. I've got too many books in here, Jamie, that have... I have got too many books in here, but I've had no insight to the people they're writing about. They've never met them, they've never interviewed them, and it's all old stuff rehashed.
Yeah.
With Bob in particular, what happened with our working methods are, I don't think I'm breaking any confidence out. I tend to, what I do is we sometimes have a chat, and then I transcribe that chat, and then I'll find archival interviews, and I'll put them into the chat. And then I build up the narrative, and you can see what part of the story we're in. And he'll say, "Did I say that? No, you didn't say that one, Bob. That was archival. I never said that. Is this from our interview? Yes. Okay, right. Well, can we just change the tone? Yep, brilliant. No worries. But he'd go through archival interviews, and as he said, and as Meryl Streep said, she's never ever contributed to a book before. And I said to her, Mel, Bob and I play a game of Did I Say? So I'm going to read back some quotes if you can. Did you say? And it was just, we were laughing at the absurdity of it. She's never given interviews of that depth. And here, some of the books I've got in here, Mel said, and Mel, I've never done. I never said that. Never said that. She said, this is what happened. And she just gave me gold from thereafter.
That's amazing. That's so amazing. I mean, I'm a big fan of behind the scenes stuff about movies and movie making. I have been all my life, really. And a big fan of documentaries that kind of chronicle the making of a movie. But I think what your books do, as opposed to documentary, it creates a special kind of time travel in a way, because you can really linger on those photos. You can linger on those faxes that you've got in the Trainspotting one, You can linger on the contracts, the budgets, all of those things that in a documentary would be, 12 frames and whiz by.
Yes.
Have you ever thought of going down the route of making any video material? Or...
Yeah, possibly. I possibly could. It's just I've been so head down with this. My buddy and I, Steve, when we set up Coattails, we wanted to make it the best we could actually make it. And I love photo books as much as the next person, but I'm not a big fan of just a photo book without any narrative. You don't tend to refer back to the photos. And likewise, when you're reading a really great story, it's nice to have some imagery with it to what happened. So it's a case of bringing those two together. But yeah, I mean, there's been some great documentaries. That Mark Harris's book, Five Came Back. I don't know if you've seen John Patek.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
brilliant three-part of that. I mean, that was just one of the greats. I mean, to me is the yardstick. If you're going to go, you're going to, and that's why egotistically, that's why I like to think my books could almost try and reach those heights. That, you know, I'm not limited because the publishers told me I can only do X, Y, Z of pages. If I want to put another 10, 20 pages in, let's go for it.
So are you self-publishing these then?
Yeah. We set up Coach House, my buddy and I, to do this. As I said, we've got Taxi Driver next, and Bob. Yeah, and we've got hopefully another two huge ones in the pipeline, which much as you said at the top of this before we turned on record, I'm not entirely sure I can tell you just yet.
Yeah,
maybe
no worries.
Maybe off air.
Do you give yourself a time limit on these books? Because I know when I've made some of my video stuff, you know, I've been reluctant to release it just in case I can get that one more person or that one more story. How do you put a time limit on it?
Yeah, you are a little bit. I won't name names, but there is a time when you just, you know, that's it now. It's got to end. It's when the story is it feeding the story by waiting for that one person, and if it is, I'll wait. If it's a no, then it's a no, but then you try and get it across to the reps or the friends that you've already spoken to say, look, this is a joy. I'll give them the manuscript. I'm not after, you know, it's mine and you've said it to me, so it's going in. I'm not looking to do that. I'm looking to make sure that it's a joy for the reader, but also the participants when they reread it. I want it to be a joy for them, and I hope that my books never go into the boring tittle tattle. There was a couple of things said to me about Michael Cimino on The Deer Hunter. Yeah, no, just never going to go in. It was funny at the time when the guy said it, but afterwards it's never going to go in. I didn't want it to be an anti-Michael Cimino tirade. We've read and heard those stories before, and this wasn't what The Deer Hunter was going to be. If it was factual, he's not around to clear it up. But I was very fortunate with Joanne Corelli, who's his business partner for every film he ever done, and she opened up his archives, and it just refuted a few of the myths that have been built up about him and The Deer Hunter. So if it's serving the story, I'll wait around. But I haven't. I mean, with Taxi Driver, I mean, it could come out tomorrow. It's not ready to come out, but it could do. It could come out next week. It could come out 6 months' time. It could come out 6 years' time. It's whenever we decide it's ready.
Really.
But I mean, ideally, I'd like it out early next year because I've got some other projects that Bob has given me the green light to work on as well. So we've got other films of his I want to investigate. Sadly,
go on.
Father Time is pushing on, and all of us are getting older, and I want to make sure that I get as many of these guys down.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that,
Jamie. Just quickly, I write these books for an audience of one, me, and it really sounds really egotistical. But if I'm not happy, it's not going out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm huge, as I've said, and I know you are a huge fan of these ilk of books. And the reason I've done them is because I want to read them. It's not a money-making venue. Yeah, I'm going to make millions. It's because I want them to be out there and I want to read them.
And I think what sets your books apart from other behind-the-scenes books, making-of books, is that they have a real feeling of an artifact, you know, because there's something that the people who are in the books can enjoy as much as the audience. You know, it's including them, it's bringing them into the book and into the process that went into making the film, and it's bringing the reader in, whether that reader is Robert De Niro or Jamie Benning. And I can imagine that it must be really gratifying for those people you've spoken to have this thing that they can always look back on as a memento.
Yeah, that is key. It's I sent out this week, we had the dust covers for Trainspotting. So there's a slight week and a bit delay. And I sent those out on Tuesday. Today's Friday, isn't it? No, I sent them out Wednesday. We got them Tuesday, sent them out Wednesday. So they had them delivered yesterday. And it was purely because it's just me and my buddy Steve. That only a few of them have gone out. But I sent them out to Irvin, John, Andrew, Danny, guys from Underworld, Bobby Gillespie. And then during the process of this next week, all the contributors will have their copies. I mean, Ewan McGregor, but obviously he's in America, so it will take a week or so. Iggy Pop. Yeah, but I had beautiful messages yesterday. And without getting too gushy, it's, you know, when you're working with heroes and they become heroes, and friends. And John Hodge, the screenwriter from Trainspotting, who had the genius to adapt Irvin's book, sent me a gorgeous email last night, and it was, oh man, it makes it all worthwhile. Andrew McDonald, the great producer, he sent me a message as well, and yeah, and that's because I mean, you've been working with these people who've been gracious enough to put you into their lives a little, and trusted you. So you don't want to break that trust, but likewise, you don't want to do you've been on them, I've been on them, these sort of press junkets when you've got 5 minutes, you ask 3 banal questions, which the previous person's asked, and the next person after you is going to ask. I don't want the book to be that. It can't be a powder puff piece. It's got to be truthful and factual. But I'm not looking out to maim anybody, but and I want it to be written well and presented well. And perhaps this is probably my hardest book, because I'm actually working with Irvine Welsh, who's one of the greatest British writers. So I've given him a book. Oh God!
And what was that comment he said? There's that comment in there he said about potentially adapting Trainspotting. It's kind of like digging up a corpse and shagging it. I mean, what's his response going to be to your book landing on his doormat?
Well, yeah. Well, he saw a temp. He's got my other books, so he knows the ilk. And what did he say? He said you're going to have to strengthen anybody buying this book, anybody lucky enough to have received this book. They're going to have to reinforce their coffee table because people are going to want to shag you on it, which is Irvine Welsh.
It's very Irvine Welsh.
Sorry for young listeners.
I remember so well the release of Trainspotting. I remember that whole thing. I mean, I was born in 76, so I was exactly 20 years old. I just started a job in a government post that I was instantly unsure of. I sort of fell into it, and I remember going on that Friday night must have been February, I guess. And
it was, yes.
And seeing that movie, and coming in the next day, I was still in training. I had 2 weeks of training along with my other new recruits there, and I remember just thinking, "Shit, I've made a bad choice here. I want to be involved in that."
Yeah. Really?
It was that film, and it was discovering Bill Hicks, the comedian, that eventually made me quit that job and get into television. Because I don't know, I ended up just working in this government post, and I was greener than green. And all of this, I hadn't gone to university at that point. I put myself through university while I was working there. And slowly I started to realise, that's the world I want to be a part of. And Trainspotting was a massive part of that. Because I remember the posters were everywhere. They were on my wall. They were on the bus. I remember reading the book and having a similar feeling to reading A Clockwork Orange, where it takes you a while to get into that kind of vernacular. And by the time you get into it, you just fallen into that world. And I felt very trapped in that job, and I was aware that I'd made the wrong decision. And I'm sure it did that for many, many people of our generation.
That's the power, isn't it? That's wonderful to hear, Jamie.
Yeah. I think, and Channel 4's input is so important in that, isn't it? As you say in your book, providing young people opportunities in the start of their careers. I mean, what a great remit that is to have. Yeah,
and it was that trust from David Orkin. And I keep saying lovely guy, and it's literally the whole thread of Trainspotting. It isn't Danny's film, and he'd be the first to say this. It is an auteur's film. Everybody played a huge part, but for the public idea, it's a Danny Boyle film. So if you look at him as the main sort of focal point, it won't surprise you that when you meet Danny, he's such a lovely guy that everybody, included in the film, is absolutely exactly the same. Andrew McDonald, the producer, absolutely genius, and it was his idea with the poster. What he wanted to do, he had a short time working in America for Stephen Woolley's firm, and he'd fallen in love and seduced by the likes of Blue Velvet. And why can't we make these films back in the UK where young people are proud to go to? That we're going to influence a Jamie Benning to leave his job. Why can't we do this? Four Weddings is a great film, ticks every box, but it could have been made in any decade.
Yeah,
Trainspotting was literally ripe to be made then and there. And they had this idea to make Shallow Grave. He'd met John Hodge, but David Orkin looked at them, and they had no right even to ask for any money off the film for them. Neither of them had ever. Andrew had never produced a film. He directed one short. John had never written a film. He was still. I think he'd just come out as a GP. I think he'd just finished, so maybe he was working. So they had no right. But David Orkin saw something in them and trusted them and gave them 750,000, I think it was, or 800,000. And they had Danny, who had some TV and theatre background. And the three of them went away. And even before they was releasing that, Andrew told me that the flat that he shared, the guy above that, I'm sure that was the story, worked for the Face.
Mm.
So he said, look, why don't I send some people down to the set of Shallow Grave? And the Face were talking about these three that were going to save the British film industry even before Shallow Grave was released. So by the time Trainspotting came round, they were already on this roll. And Andrew said he wanted to make sure that that connect worked. So instead of what had happened sometimes with British films, they're made because they're art house film and there's no thought given to find an audience. Andrew was determined to take up the mantra of what the Americans were doing and finding an audience. So not want to make a film, find an audience. And what he hit upon was, with you said about the posters, was giving them away with student rail cards.
Yeah.
So now they're in every dormitory across the UK, this poster. And what they also hit upon was that they'd been on this weekend up in Edinburgh researching, and they'd come back really despondent because, as we know, being around anybody intoxicated with drink or drugs, it can get a bit boring afterwards. It's great you thought when you're doing it, but after a period, so they spent this weekend with some sad drug addicts, and they thought, oh my God, who's on earth going to want to watch a film with this? You know, we want that euphoric feel that Irving's book's got. And that was that's that genius. They wanted that heightened reality. So you had that euphoric with drugs. You know, there is a reason why you're taking this, because it makes you feel good. The downside to it is, the reality is, it's going to cut your legs off afterwards.
Yeah.
So don't do it. But they've got to show why they were doing it. And what they didn't want to do is make Trainspotting a film about drug addicts. They wanted to make the film about a group of young people that a few of them happened to take drugs. And that's where the idea with the poster come from. Well, hang on a minute. Irving's book has reached a nice audience, but it's not. We need a bigger audience for our film. We can't make it just about drugs. We don't want to be a dour love Ken Loach, but a Ken Loach film vibe to it. Make it this heightened reality. So they had this idea of making each person on the poster identifiable as a member of a band, like the Beatles, and whatever your favorite band is, you identify with the drummer, the bass player, the guitarist, the singer. And they wanted that poster to be, and that was the genius behind that.
Yeah.
As you said, it was everywhere, but it was coolly, wasn't it? You didn't feel like it was being pushed down your throat.
It wasn't encroaching.
Oh my God, they've overkilled this. I didn't even want to see it now because my granny was going to go and see it. It's not cool. They managed to keep it cool.
There's something about that design of those posters as well, that it's just that character, and the cameras at that sort of tilted so you see their face bigger than the rest of them. And I remember that really, really well.
That was Lorenzo. Lorenzo, the great photographer. He picked up some really great ideas, and then blam, the poster designer came on board, and it was both their sort of first time, as it was with a lot of train spotters, all their first times really, very early on in their careers. And a lot of things, when it's your first time, you come in with this innocence, don't you? You don't know the rules, so you don't know you're breaking them. And sometimes, why are rules there? Oh, because it's worked before. Has it really worked? Why can't we give it a go like this? And this was with Trainspotting all the way through. The marketing, the filming, the posters, the soundtrack. Well, you're never going to afford the Iggy Pops and da-da-da-da. Well, why can we ask? Can we just ask? And that's that thing, isn't it? It's like giving a Walter a message. Can you come? Bob, I'm doing this book about deer hunters. Could you be interviewed? But I guarantee what's going to happen. Absolutely 100% guarantee. If you don't ask, they're never going to come on board. That is a given.
Yeah. I was related to those posters as well. I really felt that first, I think it's like the first 6 minutes of the movie where every character is introduced. It's just incredible bit of filmmaking, and really mirrors what you see in those posters, and they're fixed in your mind for the rest of the movie. So even if you hadn't seen the poster, that first 6 minutes really sets it up, but they do really back up what the film is trying to do. I loved as well the story you gave about Kelly MacDonald getting cast in the film. Again, another one of those moments of incredible serendipity where, she's not an actress. Well, you can tell the story.
Well, it's sliding doors, isn't it? It literally is sliding doors moment. There's a very, very, very quick scene in the film, in the nightclub, when you see Sick Boy kissing a girl. In fact, is he kissing her? Because they're actually slipping a pill on the tongue. That young girl was it was down to two, Kelly and that young girl, to get Diane. And so sliding doors, Kelly MacDonald could have been the young girl kissing sick boy, and effectively never heard of again. But yeah, she'd been working in some bars and picked up the leaflet working in there, and it was looking for the new Kate Moss, Patricia Arquette. And I remember finding that little poster and
Yeah, that's great
emailing
that
it
you
over to
included
Danny.
that.
Yeah. And his Danny come back, whoa, man, you'd never get away with that now. It's just wrong on every level, isn't it? And she just had her hair cut. She had no money, just working in a bar, living on her own, well, sharing an apartment with a group of girls. The money was very tight. So she hit, she said, I really wanted to do it, but the photos that you had to send in were going to be my bread and milk for the week. What do I do? Couldn't afford the book, so went into the local bookshop and read chapters of it during the course of the week just to get an idea. And she finally, being a good Scottish girl, she said, I'd put the money into the photos to get the photos out of the photo booth. And being a good Scottish girl, I knew I wasn't going to waste that money. Once they had come out, that was me. I had to go. She got into the audition, 400 odd other girls, and they all had lovely long hair and probably looked a bit like Kate Moss and Patricia Arquette. She's got dark hair, cut short by a friend, holey jeans on, baggy jumper. She thought, oh my God, I don't fit in here at all. And Danny had seen her. And he said to me, as soon as she walked in, I'll never forget it. Never, ever forget it. As soon as I thought, oh my God, that's Diane. And what happened in the audition was every time somebody went up to sit to talk to Andrew, Danny, and Gal Stevens, the casting agent, somebody else sat in the seat to vacate that vacated seat. And so Kelly's slowly making her way down, and she sat in the seat, and Danny said, she spoke, and I thought, oh my word, please film well. And then she came back for a couple of auditions, and then she finally got to do a read through review. And Kelly said that I suppose Ewan even recognised me when I went back and actually got the film, because I had the script in front of my face the whole time. Whereas Ewan said, as soon as I started talking to her, I thought, oh my word, this is dying, because he knew that she had to play a schoolgirl and a young girl. That surprise element. And what a career! I mean, what a career she's had. It's just remarkable, isn't it? Not plucked out of film school or whatever. She'd never acted before on stage anywhere.
Yeah,
just a God-given talent, isn't it? And a huge amount of work has gone into to nurture that talent as well.
Yeah, but it's really evident, isn't it? Even in Trainspotting, that she's really got that spark that they saw. Obviously. I love that bit where he said that, she had the same name as one of the producers, and she sort of said it back, in a sarcastic way, not too much sarcasm, but enough for them to go, oh my God, it's her, it's the character, it's Diane.
When she berates Ewan outside the club, isn't it? And during the audition, when Danny said, you Kelly MacDonald, it's the same name as our producer. What, the producer's called Kelly MacDonald?
Yeah.
There was this frisson of, oh my word, that little snarkiness, that little thing we need for Diane. This girl's got in spades.
I think what your books are really good at as well is digging out the sort of the people feel they can be honest about it. Like Ewan Bremner openly talks about his kind of, turning down the job and not wanting to do that particular role because he played Renton and everything else on the stage, and that must be quite hard for an actor to admit those things. You seem to be able to put them in a position where they feel comfortable in imparting these stories. What do you think that's down to?
It's weird, isn't it? I don't know why, to be fair. I'm glad
Disarming.
I don't know why. I think it is. It's just much like we're chatting at the top of this before you hit record. You said, look, Jay, it's just going to be an informal chat. And I just make sure that our chats are like this, and offer up I'll transcribe and I'll send it back, and if you want to take anything out. And I think when it's the truth and when it's not hurting anybody, it's perhaps the only person that's hurting is Ewan himself in that sense. But I think it shows that he's human. It was his role for 2 years, and it also shows the flip that he then had, because he realised the genius of Danny Boyle. They weren't making Trainspotting the Christine F kind of version. They were making this heightened reality, and they needed an Alfie, they needed a star to anchor it. And I don't think perhaps Ewan Bremner appreciated enough just how much Spud in Danny's version was going to be the heartbeat of the film. He's such a lovely guy.
Yeah.
And only Ewan Bremner really could have played that role and I think that's wonderful that Ewan came to that realization, because who else could have played Spud and Ewan Bremner? This beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful guy. In reality as well, he's such a lovely man, so giving, such a lovely guy.
Yeah, after that scene of him with the interview is just one of the funniest
Yeah,
scenes ever. But also, you kind of want to give the man a hug. You
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. Which is I keep saying the word genius as well, which is Danny's genius, isn't it? In this sense, because on every level, train spotting should not work. It is about an element of society, perhaps the old NIMBYs you wouldn't want in your backyard, would you?
Mm, mm.
As much as liberal as all of us are, and we want to make sure that the vulnerable in society are looked after, Tradak, but we all feel this affinity to them and this love towards them because of Danny's genius. You even
Yeah,
feel love for Begbie, for Christ's sake. He's one of the most
yeah,
old people in the
yeah.
world.
That's the thing. I think there's something about what he does in that movie, Danny, that we can all somehow kind of understand how quickly life can unravel if we
Yes.
let it.
Mm.
And I mean, obviously, that's in Irvin's writing as well. I was also going to say about Raging Bull and about Trainspotting that they sort of share a similar kind of energy that is harnessed by the directors.
Mm.
Really, I think of Raging Bull as a 70s movie. What was it, 1980 it was released, but it feels like it
100%. Yeah,
it feels like it caps off the 70s, doesn't it? It caps off that era of these, new young filmmakers coming in, independent movies, starting with Easy Rider, I guess. And it sort of caps it off, whereas with Trainspotting, it feels like it was the spark that ignited another 1,000 young filmmakers.
exactly right, isn't it? And pure, Danny won't mind me saying he's a huge fan of Martin Scorsese, and they screened Goodfellas before they started Trainspotting. And then Ewan, fast forward about a week into filming, Ewan went to Danny and said, Ewan said to me, "What the hell? I've seen, all these guys pop, they have their moment, and I'm doing nothing. I literally was doing nothing." And I went to Danny and said, without being too egotistical, I thought you said I was going to be the star. I'm not doing anything. He said, "No, you're the fulcrum. Everything's coming around you. And also, you're our Alfie. You've got the voiceover, i.e. Goodfellas. You've got that voiceover. The voiceover is yours." And that come from Martin Scorsese. Danny's a huge fan, that energy. And it's right what you say about Raging Bull, because it took 6 to 8 years to get Raging Bull off the ground. I think just over 6 years. Bob found it first when he was making 1900. He took it to Palmer and read it over there, and that would have been 74. So it took 6 years. It's a 70s film, but no one wanted to make it. As it says in the front pages, why would anybody want to see a film about a cockroach?
Yeah.
And, Bob silently said he's not a cockroach. And Owen Winkler said he felt the air come out of the room. And then in Marty's apartment, he thought that Bob was going to throw the executive out the window. And that's the belief. And I think that's what comes across in all the films that I've investigated already, and then the films that I'm hopefully going to investigate, is that inner belief of the filmmakers.
Yeah.
And that certainly comes across in Trainspotting. You have to. There's a theme that runs through the book. If you picked it up on it, that every time someone's cast, he's a believer.
I was just going to say that very thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because Danny said it to me at my very first meet-up lunch with him. He said, Trainspotting was a believer's thing. You had to believe in it. This wasn't a film for just hangers-on. You had to invest in it. I went, "Oh, that's quite good." And he said it a couple of times, and then I've picked up on it during the course. And I just had this idea of the Magnificent Seven, when Steve McQueen and Yul Brynner are finding the team, and they hold their fingers up. They've got 3 now, they've got 4 now, they've got 5. And I just wanted to make that kind of vibe during the course of Trainspotting, when they're picking up each cast member, but also crew member. Kay Quinn, the production designer, Rachel Fleming, the costume designer, Brian Tufano, the cinematographer, all key heads of their department that brought that to it. And I just wanted to make sure that the reader knew that when you're making a film of Trainspotting's depth and vastness for £1 million, you have to believe.
Yeah.
£1 million. It's just remarkable, isn't it, Jamie?
It's bonkers, isn't it? Looking at that budget this morning, I was just sort of going through thinking, wow, how did they achieve that on that budget? I mean, it could never have been done again. Once that film was made, that was the end of that. But yeah, that thing about belief, I've got it written here in my notes. I did definitely pick up on that. And, it feels like my kind of favorite movie in a way, where you get these disparate group of people together for this single cause, and they all set off, and some fall by the wayside, but others make it. And that's what's great about your books, is you really feel like you're on the journey with these people.
Yeah, I think that I'm sure you've had it. I certainly have had it with books that I've read, articles that I've read, TV that I've watched. You're here and they're there. You're never going to meet them. And I wanted to feel, and I want to feel when I'm interviewing somebody and I'm writing the book, that I'm actually part of the book. But personally, I actually take myself out of the writing. I don't really want to hear the writer pontificate about this, that, and the other. I'm not a film critique. And there's a few books in this room, and remain nameless, that I've hardly ever picked up after the first read, because I've never felt included. Always felt like, they're learned, they know it all, and I don't. And I want to make sure that with my books, that the reader actually feels like they're on the journey making the film, and you feel like you could be a part of it, and it's a warm, safe environment to dive into. And some, preposterous to say that, I know, but that's what I want, because I want to feel like that when I'm reading a book. I could have been a part of it. Why couldn't I? Come on, run this journey, this narrative all the way through. So hopefully you do get to the end of my book. Whereas we've all had books perhaps we haven't even finished, and I don't want that with my books. I want to make sure that people want to read them, because there's always something to learn. But the facts don't overcloud the narrative. Yeah, there's a narrative thread running through them, and I want the reader to make it feel like I'm on the journey with this great group of filmmakers.
Yeah, I've read many books about films that are all a bit self-congratulatory. There's all a lot of backslapping. And while in your books there is room to say, wow, didn't this turn out great? You're taken on the journey as well. It isn't about kind of ticking boxes or, backslapping. There's a book I'm reading at the moment, which I won't mention, but this particular person is just kind of putting himself in all of these. He was, worked on a lot of big movies, but he puts himself in the middle of all these big moments, all these big decisions that turned out brilliantly. And he's left no room to sort of say, well, that was a shit idea and it didn't turn out well. And you end up kind of disliking him because of it, because there's no humanity there. There's no sort of, no way to connect.
Yeah. Success has many fathers though, doesn't it? Yeah. Failure generally has none. That's not art, but that's what you've got to try and have in you when you're setting forth on this little bullshit barometer. Keep it lit, keep it bubbling, because you can smell the bullshit. Really? Was you really involved in that decision? That really, come on, that was that. You don't need to say that during the interview, but deep down once they've said it, that's never going to make the book. There's no way you're going to get credit for that. Never. When you're Bob or Marty, of course you're going to get the credit, because we know where the credit should be. But there's often when you're setting forth on these journeys that, but when you say the writer themselves has put themselves in there, oh God, I could think of nothing worse for me. If I didn't have my name on the book, it wouldn't matter to me. I don't want my name. What the hell have I had to do with Raging Bull, Trainspotting? Absolutely nothing. All I've done is help bring the people to the party. So I don't what. Yeah, and he said to me, and I remember he said to me, and I'm great mates. No, I don't want that. I don't want that vibe into the book. This is their story. Yeah. Hopefully, all my job is to cheesily, I know, and I've said it before, but you get given a baton and you just don't want to drop that baton. Make sure I can hold it or pass it to the next participant, and they pass it back, and I pass it to the next participant. That's when you see the journey evolve, hopefully, for the reader.
You allow a story to be told. You don't say, I'm telling this story.
Look
how a big distinction. Look how important I am, because I've managed to speak to these people. And, I have listened to an interview with you before, and just coming across today, you have a humbleness about you that is very warming, and makes people feel thrilled about wanting to read the books, hopefully. And
thank you. I mean, God almighty, if I sat there thinking I was anywhere in the same sphere as these guys, where would we be? You can't, as you know, you got to be humble. You got to do your work beforehand. I can see you looking at a few notes there, but I never have a pad with my notes here. The first question, second question, third question.
Mine are just
keywords. Exactly. And somebody told me that very, very early on, one of my first ever interviews with one of our greatest film producers. And I'd left him to last. in this project I was working on. It was Jeremy Thomas. Sorry, I hadn't left him to last. What happened was, he said, how have the other interviews gone? And I'd sent through the list of people that had come on board in this particular thing I was doing. And I said, I haven't interviewed them yet. And you could see, and I'm sure Jeremy won't mind me saying this, you could see the heckles. But you said you'd already interviewed them. I said, no. I am interviewing them, but I wanted you to be the first. He said, what did he say? He said, I don't remember what he said, but get the horrible film producer out of the way first. I said, yeah. I said, basically, if I could interview you, I can interview any of them. And when I was going into that interview, I remember a friend, an older friend, should we say, who was in the print industry, in the newspapers. He said, have a question, have a start, beginning, middle, and end, but don't have a second question written in blood, because you never know where that first question is going to take you. He said, and I've seen it happen. People ask the first question, not even listening to the answer, and they're already asking their second question. You've just given them an avenue. They've given them the keys to the kingdom in that first answer, and they've not even listened to it. So that's, if there's any lesson that I've learned, is that it's just be fluid and take yourself out of it and show these people all the respect they deserve. But you can't be too sycophantal. You're there to do a job, and
that's it.
Push it along, and come on. Hopefully put your arm around them, figuratively speaking, if you're in the same room with them. Have that banter with them, and that if it's, I don't particularly like doing press junkets when you've got 8 minutes. If you can give me some time and we can, talk about different things and around things, and out of that will come some great insights. Nick Rogue was the hardest interview you'll ever do, God rest his soul. The hardest ever. You go online and watch some of them. They're horrific. Because the first thing he said to me when we went up to his study, forgive me for my grasshopper mind. And you couldn't wish for a better summing up than Nick Rogue and the grasshopper. It'd be everywhere. And now I'm contradicting myself. I did actually write some questions down. I remember I got them out of the book because I knew that I was interviewing Nick Rogue. I got them out, asked him the first question. It was about 20 odd minutes and he still hadn't answered. I remember I put the questions back in the bag. I'm like, no chance, absolutely no chance. His wife came up and said, now, Jay, is he behaving himself? She looked at me and I looked at her and she said, Nick, answer the questions. And it was just, but in there, I knew that if I just let my phone run, when I got home, it was then my job to work out, there's a nugget. There's another nugget, and it was to go mining, really. I had to find the nuggets and go mining within the conversation. But as a linear conversation, very much like his films, it was all over the show.
That's the thing, is though, you are the curator of all these stills and these documents and these stories, and that's what you do so well, is you curate them to a point where we can understand it and experience it. And I feel really dumb in not having known about your books before this year. It's crazy because they're right up my street. I will say that the Trainspotting one is on my Christmas list, very much so this year. And even though you were kind enough to send the press watermarked versions on PDF, there's nothing quite like having that physical thing in your hand. And I can see them behind you now. And
I mean, and they're beautiful, aren't they? And that
really nice.
Really, me bigging up my daughters. Aren't they gorgeous? It's because I put so much. I want them. I actually want them.
Yeah.
Reduce them to earn a quick buck. I actually want them. And my only disappointment is because we're just me and my buddy. We have to make them limited releases because we just haven't got the capacity to take in any more books or the strength of money to order 20,000 and know we're going to sell them all. You have to, so we make them roughly around 1,000 release, and because they're pretty big. Can you imagine getting 1,000 of them delivered? You need to know you're going to get rid of them. And thankfully, the uptake has been really good. But the downside is they're quite expensive. Thankfully, we've got a few that aren't at the moment because we've got over delivered, and there are a few of them. They're not damaged. You wait till you get yours; you'll never ever know. They're beautiful. So I'm really excited for you to take receipt of your Raging Bull book, because I know you're going to absolutely love it.
Yeah, big time. So where can people get hold of them, Jay?
The coattails. I was being interviewed just to Clang by Jonathan Ross, and came into a green room, and he said, I think probably Gillespie. There was a few guests there. Anyhow, he said, "Hello there, boom, lovely to meet you, lovely to meet you," because it was for the David Bowie book. riding on the coattails of David Bowie. I'll speak to you later. And I remember thinking, ooh, coattails, because I'm always going to be doing a story on the back of somebody.
Sure, yeah.
No one's going to want to know about my life, so it's always going to be on the coattails of somebody's life. But Coattails Publications, that's going to be the name of my publishing little company. So yeah, it's Coattails Publications, and they're normally limited releases. Well, they all are limited releases. Yeah, no, I just hope we haven't had any feedback, negative feedback thus far. They're exactly where I want them to be. I mean, a buddy of mine comes in, one of my oldest, dearest chums designs the covers. Another great friend of mine comes in, and I write the manuscript and then work out where all the images are going, and he takes it away and glosses it and makes it look lovely, and then comes back and can we change a few things? And so they're exactly where I want them to be. I can honestly say I wouldn't change a thing of any of them, which is pretty gratifying. Yeah, so deep into Taxi Driver next and unearthing some great finds.
Exciting.
Talking to some great people. Yeah. It's a great story, but already, the danger is I keep rereading what I've written. It's 22,000 words at the moment, and it's because the lead into it with Paul Schrader, Michael Phillips, the producer, it's a great story already forming. And you've got New York, which is another huge component of Taxi Driver with his knees, and it really is, you can smell it in every frame of that film.
Yeah. Again, another film where the opening sequence kind of defines the film and gives you that feeling. I spoke to Dan Perry for this podcast, he created that opening sequence.
Yeah, he contributed to Raging Bull, didn't he?
Yeah, I saw that as well, yeah, because of course he was the one that insisted on the Raging Bull with the red title.
Yeah.
Not Raging Bull, but Raging Bull.
Yeah.
Interesting guy, Dan. And, it's amazing to get all these collaborators to contribute to your book as well, because as much as we look at people like Scorsese as this auteur, we have to understand that it's the most collaborative art form out there, film,
Yes.
and you do that fantastically in your books.
Yeah. I want everybody to have their little day in the sunshine. If I'm going to interview them, I don't just want in Jamie Benning done the titles.
Yeah.
And you've been gone.
Yeah.
Who's Jamie? Where's he come from? I don't need to know everything about the youth. I find that a little bit boring when I'm reading biographies and there's 400 pages about them at school. Because the reason we want to know about them is because we're interested in them as the person, the actor or the director. But yeah, I want to make sure that every person that I've interviewed will have their little day in the sunshine. Hopefully you'll come away every one of my books, and every time I talk about a person, you've got to know them a little bit. And that's my aim. So Dan was a big part of Raging Bull. He's a big part of Taxi Driver. I'll be calling on him.
Yeah.
As I have with all the main people. Fingers crossed I can get Harvey Keitel on board. And
amazing. Well, hopefully, each time you do one of these, I'm sure, it has a snowball effect and a domino effect that helps, those people get on board. I know, for instance, with my little podcast I started last year, as soon as I got some of the bigger names, people went from no thanks to, oh, you had so-and-so. Oh, yeah, I'd be interested.
Exactly what I'd done when you said, Jay, would you mind? I thought, oh, bloody hell, okay, oh, yeah. It's not... It's the same with my books. You think, bloody hell, when you first set forth, someone's got to be first to put their head above the parapet. So as you're creating a cast list, do you go with Robert De Niro first? In my view, it's much better to go with some of the crew and the cast, and they can see the depth of where you're going to with the project. The downside to that, flip it, if you don't get Robert De Niro, have you got a project? But I just thought, well, I'm not being paid to do it. It's doing it on spec. If I get it to such a level that Robert De Niro can see the cut of my jib is quite serious, that's going to be my business card. In fact, thankfully now I've got a half decent little business card that, as you say, when I then approach another filmmaker, or as it happened to me the other day, a filmmaker approaches me, that's when you hopefully you're cooking with gas then, and you think, and then you just hope you can do the film justice. Yeah, and as I say, when you're foolhardy enough to do it with a sort of first-hand all vibe, you've got to make sure you get the people on board, and if they're not going to come on board, you haven't really got a story. So it's this leg thing. So you're just hoping that because you've got a few people in your canon that they've trusted you, that you hope the other people will trust you as well.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, because you're doing it for yourself as a reader, you are meeting those high expectations, because we want to see something definitive as readers, and to have that sort of put that pressure on yourself is probably a very productive way to approach it.
Yeah, it is. And I haven't got a publisher or an editor telling
Yeah.
me this, that, and the other. And I hate stodgy reads, absolutely hate. And that doesn't mean that I like a flippant, flimsy read. I hate stodginess. I absolutely hate it. To me, every book should be like Trainspotting, 90 minutes, the best pop song you can write, 3 minutes, bang, done. And that's
Yeah.
what every book should be. If there are 80,000 words to sell the story, it's going to be 80,000 words. I'm not just going to bung another 20 in to make it 100,000 just to meet my quota. If it doesn't, cut it, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Right? Like the John Wayne School of Acting: talk low, slow, and don't say a lot.
Yeah.
And that's really what a great book should be. It should take you on this journey without too much bloody stodging there.
Yeah.
And that's really what I hope to achieve. And as you say, yeah, do these guys justice. We're talking about some of the greatest films ever made. You've got to do these guys justice. You have to. These guys are at the top of their thing. And the opener, the Deer Hunter, one of the last conversations on that particular film Bob and I had, he said to me that I just knew you were going to do a great job. We knew you were serious when you first approached us, and that was the same with Chris and the same with Mel. And God, I don't mind admitting there was a real lump in my throat when he said it. And I said, Bob, well, before you go, that's going to be the opening to the book, if you don't mind. He said, what? And I said, what you just said. I said, whoa, this made me a little bit choked. And it was the opening to the book. It is the opening to the book, because it's just, it was just so lovely of him to say that.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my chat there with movie book author Jay Glennie. I certainly did. I'm sure we're going to keep in touch as we share a similar fascination with these stories, as I'm sure you gathered. And as I said before you heard that conversation, I have an independent podcast. This is it. And, Jay has his independent book company. And I think it's really important to support these people, because we are fans. We are making them for people like us. So yeah, do check out Coattail Publications. So it's coattail-publications.com. Check out the website. There's some deals on there at the moment to get these books, which are very limited run for a good price as well. So do check that out. I just picked up myself a copy of the Raging Bull making of book by Jay, and it's gorgeous. It's a stunning book. Coming up on the Filmumentaries podcast, I have several great guests, including director John Spira. We've already spoken, so that's going to be coming out soon. Composer Daniel Pemberton and I are hopefully fixing a date in January. I have VFX veteran Bill Kimberlin, VFX supervisor Craig Barron, as well as the director of 2013's Jodorowsky's Dune, Frank Pavich. He's coming back on because, as you'll know, if you listen to episode 39, we didn't get a great deal of time to talk about his excellent film. And Frank and I have been chatting a lot offline and have become quite friendly. And I said, look, I'd love to have you back on. He said, sure, let's do it. So I'm really looking forward to that one. There are a few more that I won't mention just yet, as we're just trying to pin down dates. But there's some pretty cool guests coming up, including a costume designer, a cinematographer. Yeah, I'm fingers crossed on those ones. I did hear back from director Joe Johnston. Here's what he said. Hi, Jamie. Let's put it off for now. I'm involved in a few endeavours that have nothing to do with film. Let's speak when I have the presence of mind to consider talking about films. So it's not a no. It sounds like, he's still keen at some point, but just when his head is in the right place. And I know what it's like when you've got other projects going on. It's difficult to shift gears. So thanks, Joe. And I look forward to having you on the podcast sometime in the future. I really feel like chatting with Joe could be a podcast series all of its own. I mean, wow, what a career, what an influence his work has had. Filmmaking and the wider cultural landscape, really. I did get some good news from Steadicam inventor Garrett Brown. He's found some time in January 2022 to come on the podcast and talk about his amazing innovation, the Steadicam, as well as his career very much at the peak of the film industry. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, add a review. It's the only way this independent podcast is going to avoid getting buried by the big commercial ones. Very grateful to you for joining me for episode 40, and I hope you can do so again for episode 41 of the Filmumentaries podcast.